My wealthy husband labeled me infertile in front of everyone in court. His plan to void our marriage and keep his fortune included a clause that would leave me empty-handed if we split. I remained calm and handed an envelope to the judge. The contents shocked everyone in the room. Imagine the deepest betrayal, not just a lie, but a calculated, brutal deception orchestrated by the man who vowed to love you. My millionaire husband, Noah, stood there, in front of a packed courtroom, publicly branding me as sterile, a defective woman who had shattered his dreams. He thought he had me cornered, but as I reached into my purse, a different kind of smile touched my lips. That's right. I smiled. And, trust me, you'll want to know why. 3 years before that brutal courtroom drama, my world felt like a perfectly curated dream. I was an events coordinator in a dazzling Manhattan boutique hotel, meticulously crafting unforgettable moments for others, completely oblivious to the elaborate deception awaiting me. Then, Noah Miller walked into my life, straight out of a romance novel. 6'2", with salt and pepper hair, piercing blue eyes that could melt glaciers, and a smile that probably cost more than my entire apartment. He was planning his company's annual gala, and I, lucky me, was assigned to make his every wish come true. "I need this to be perfect," he'd murmured, leaning across my desk, those intense eyes locking onto mine. Money is no object. Famous last words, right? But back then, I was completely, utterly dazzled. This man sent flowers to my tiny studio apartment every single day for a week. He took me to restaurants where the waiters knew his name and the wine cost more than my monthly rent. When he proposed on his penthouse balcony, overlooking Central Park, with a ring that could have funded a small country, I truly believed I'd won the relationship lottery. The wedding was a fairy tale come true. Noah spared no expense. Designer dress, a celebrity wedding planner, a guest list straight out of Forbes magazine. His mother, Brenda, flew in from California, wearing enough jewelry to stock Tiffany's. His business partner, Liam, gave this incredibly touching toast about their friendship and success that had everyone raising their glasses. I felt like Chloe, finally getting her happily ever after. But fairy tales don't prepare you for what happens when the clock strikes midnight and your prince turns back into something far worse than a frog. At least frogs are honest. The first glaring red flag should have been our honeymoon in Tuscany. We were staying at this incredible villa, vineyard views stretching for miles, and I was practically glowing with newlywed bliss. "Noah," I remember saying over breakfast on our private terrace, "I've been thinking about starting a family. Maybe we could start trying when we get back." His espresso cup paused halfway to his lips, like I'd just suggested we sacrifice a goat. "That's wonderful, darling," he said, slowly, "but let's not rush into anything. We should enjoy being married first." Reasonable, right? Except enjoying being married apparently meant Noah working 16-hour days, while I decorated our penthouse and planned dinner parties for his business associates. Every single time I brought up children, he had another excuse ready, like he'd been practicing in the mirror. The company was expanding. The market was volatile. He wanted to take me to Paris first, or Tokyo, or Mars, anywhere he could think of to change the subject. But those trips, oh, they were absolutely perfect. Noah would transform back into Prince Charming. He'd hold my hand as we toured the Louvre, kiss me on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset, post romantic photos on social media with captions about his beautiful wife. His followers ate it up, commenting about relationship goals and asking when we'd have little ones. If only they could see us behind closed doors, where my husband treated me like expensive furniture, beautiful to look at, but not particularly functional. The moment we'd return from any trip, Noah would disappear faster than my hopes for our marriage. His office became his sanctuary. The gym, his second home. And our bedroom felt like a museum. Beautiful, yes, but completely untouchable. When I tried to initiate any kind of intimacy, he'd suddenly remember an urgent email that required his immediate attention. Because apparently, market fluctuations can't wait for your wife to feel loved. I started making excuses for him. It felt like a part-time job. Successful men have demanding schedules, I'd tell myself. He's building an empire, and that takes sacrifice. But late at night, Staring at the ceiling of our king-sized bed while he slept with his back to me, I couldn't shake the chilling feeling that something fundamental was wrong. And by something, I mean everything. My friend, Maya, a nurse who'd known me since college, was the first person to call out the obvious. "Chloe, you look exhausted," she'd said during one of our monthly brunches, studying my face like I was one of her patients. "When's the last time you and Noah had a real conversation?" "We talk all the time." I protested, but even I could hear how hollow that sounded. It was like saying we breathed the same air, so obviously we were communicating. About what? His work? Your social calendar? When's the last time he asked how you're feeling about anything that actually matters to you? I couldn't answer. I couldn't remember. Noah had mastered the art of conversation without actually communicating, like a politician, but with better hair and far worse intentions. He'd ask about my day while scrolling through his phone. He'd compliment my appearance for public consumption, but in private, I might as well have been wallpaper. The breaking point came on our second anniversary. I'd planned this romantic evening, his favorite restaurant, a bottle of wine we'd shared on our wedding night, lingerie that cost more than most people's mortgage payments. I desperately wanted to feel connected to my husband again, to remember why we'd fallen in love in the first place. Noah came home 3 hours late. "Sorry, darling," he'd said, loosening his tie without actually looking at me. Liam and I were reviewing quarterly projections, and you know how time flies when you're discussing expansion strategies. There I was, standing in our living room, wearing a dress that hugged every curve, makeup perfect, hope dying a slow and painful death in my chest. "Noah, it's our anniversary." He paused, with that deer-in-headlights look, before his practiced smile slid into place. "Of course it is. How thoughtless of me. Let me just shower and we can order takeout from that Thai place you like." Takeout. On our anniversary. While I stood there, dressed for seduction, feeling like the world's most expensive fool. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. While Noah showered, claiming he needed to wash off the stress of his day, because apparently, stress is something you can scrub away with expensive soap, I picked up his phone. I know snooping is wrong. I really do. But desperate times call for desperate measures, and I was drowning in my own marriage. His text messages were surprisingly innocent. Business conversations with Liam, scheduling with his assistant, the usual boring corporate communications. No secret affairs, no steamy exchanges with mysterious women. If anything, his digital life was as sterile as our relationship. How fitting. But something nagged at me. The way he and Liam texted felt different, comfortable in a way that Noah never seemed with me anymore. They had inside jokes, shared references, and easy intimacy that I envied. It was like watching two people who actually liked each other, which was a foreign concept in my marriage. You know what they say about curiosity and cats? Well, this cat was about to discover some very interesting information, and I was definitely going to survive to tell about it. Take Liam, for example. Noah's business partner, best friends since college, and the man who seemed to know my husband's schedule better than his own wife did. They'd roomed together at Harvard, started their investment firm right after graduation. And somehow, Liam was always around. Always invited to our dinner parties. Always joining us for holidays. Always the third wheel, who never actually felt like a third wheel. More like I was the third wheel in their perfectly choreographed friendship. I started paying attention to things I'd previously ignored because I was too busy playing the perfect wife. The way Noah's entire demeanor would change when Liam walked into a room, suddenly animated, genuinely laughing, more alive than I'd seen him in months. The way they'd stand just a little too close during business discussions, their conversations flowing with an ease that made me feel like an outsider in my own home. "Liam is coming for Thanksgiving," Noah announced one evening in November, not asking, but informing me, like I was his secretary. "Of course he is," I replied, not bothering to hide my sarcasm. Would it be a holiday without Liam? Should I set a place for him at our anniversary dinner too? Oh wait, we don't have those anymore. Noah shot me a sharp look. "He's family, Chloe. You know he doesn't have anywhere else to go." Family. Interesting choice of words. considering Liam had parents in Connecticut and a sister in Boston, but apparently, our dinner table was where he belonged for every major holiday. I was starting to feel like the unwanted guest at my own celebrations, which is quite an achievement when you're paying for the turkey. But instead of starting another fight that would go nowhere, I decided to play detective. During Christmas dinner, I watched them like I was studying for the most important exam of my life. The shared glances, the way Liam could make Noah laugh with just a raised eyebrow, the comfortable silence between them that spoke volumes. When Liam complimented the dinner I'd spent all day preparing, Noah beamed with pride as if he'd cooked it himself. Here's something fun. Have you ever watched two people who are clearly in love try to pretend they're just friends? It's like watching a badly acted play where everyone's forgotten their lines, but keeps going anyway. After the holidays, I made a discovery that sent my world spinning off its axis. Noah had forgotten to lock his home office safe. Something that never happened. Because my husband was more obsessive about security than the Pentagon. He kept important documents in there, property deeds, investment portfolios, insurance policies, and apparently, life-changing secrets. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew I was crossing about 17 different lines. But my marriage was already broken, and I desperately needed to understand why I was living with a stranger who happened to share my last name. Most of the contents were exactly what you'd expect: legal documents, financial records, business contracts. But tucked between his property deeds and his life insurance policy, like some kind of twisted Christmas present, I found a manila envelope with a medical clinic's logo. The letterhead read, Metropolitan Men's Health Center. And the date? 3 years before we'd even met. Before he'd swept me off my feet with talk of building a life together. Before he'd nodded sympathetically every time I mentioned wanting children. My hands were shaking as I opened it, and, honestly, they should have been. Vasectomy consultation and procedure confirmation. Voluntary sterilization completed successfully. Patient counseled on permanence of procedure. Let that sink in for a moment. My husband had me believing I was broken, while he literally made sure we could never have children. The audacity was almost impressive. The envelope slipped from my numb fingers like a smoking gun. And for a moment, I just stood there in Noah's office, staring at the evidence scattered across his mahogany desk. 3 years before he'd met me. 3 years before he'd swept me off my feet with promises of forever. 3 years before he'd let me believe that my body was somehow failing us both. Every conversation about our future family had been a performance worthy of an Oscar. Every time I'd suggested baby names or pointed out cute nursery furniture, he'd been acting. This man had built our entire relationship on a foundation of lies so elaborate it would make politicians jealous. I photographed the documents with my phone, my hands still trembling with a combination of rage and raw vindication. Then I carefully returned everything to its exact position in the safe. Because if Noah thought he was the only one who could play the long game, he was about to get a very rude awakening. The next few weeks were pure torture. I sat across from Noah at dinner, making small talk about his day, while inside, I was screaming loud enough to wake the dead. I watched him chat with Liam about their latest business ventures, and suddenly their relationship took on a completely different dimension. Had Liam known about the vasectomy? Was he part of this elaborate deception too? Of course he was. You don't share a dorm room, start a business, and maintain a decades-long friendship without knowing your partner's medical history, especially when that medical history directly impacts the woman he's married to. You seem distracted lately, Noah observed one evening, not looking up from his tablet as he scrolled through emails, playing the caring husband he pretended to be. Just tired, I replied, wondering how he could be so oblivious to the fact that I'd uncovered his monumental lies. But then again, Noah had always been excellent at seeing only what he wanted to see. It's a useful skill when you're living a double life. The final, sickening piece of the puzzle fell into place during a dinner party we hosted for some of Noah's business associates. I was playing the perfect hostess, as always, when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Liam was adjusting Noah's tie, an intimate gesture that lasted just a beat too long. Their eyes met, and in that moment, I saw something that explained absolutely everything. Love. Not friendship. Not business partnership. but genuine, deep, romantic love. I excused myself to the kitchen and gripped the marble countertop until my knuckles turned white. How long had they been together? Had their relationship started in college, or was it something that developed over years of building their business empire together? More importantly, why had Noah married me if he was in love with someone else? The answer was probably sitting right there in that manila envelope, wasn't it? The vasectomy. The marriage to a woman who desperately wanted children. The prenuptial agreement I'd signed without reading carefully because I'd been blinded by love and expensive jewelry. It all added up to something calculated and cruel. Noah had married me as a cover. A beautiful, successful wife to parade around while he lived his real life with Liam. And when our childless marriage inevitably failed because I couldn't get pregnant, he'd be able to keep his fortune intact while playing the victim of a defective woman who couldn't give him the heir he wanted. It was actually brilliant, in a completely sociopathic way. I almost had to admire the planning involved. Almost. I started doing research like my life depended on it, because frankly, it did. Real research, not just connecting dots and drawing conclusions like some discount detective. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Detective Emily Ramirez, who specialized in matrimonial cases and had the kind of track record that suggested she'd seen every flavor of marital deception imaginable. I paid her with money from an account Noah didn't know about, a small inheritance from my grandmother that I'd kept separate from our joint finances. Because apparently, I had better instincts about protecting myself than I'd given myself credit for. I need to know if my husband is having an affair, I told Emily during our first meeting at a quiet coffee shop in Queens, far from anywhere Noah or Liam might accidentally stumble upon us. Emily was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and professional, with a kind of no-nonsense attitude I wished I'd possessed 3 years ago. Most wives have a gut feeling before they have proof, she'd said, studying me across the small table. What's yours telling you? That my marriage has been a lie from day one. And I'm about to prove it. She nodded, like she'd heard this story 1,000 times before, which was either reassuring or deeply depressing. Give me 3 weeks. If there's something to find, I'll find it. Those 3 weeks were the longest of my life. I had to continue playing the devoted wife, while inside, I was building a case for my own liberation. No one noticed nothing different about my behavior, which honestly told me everything I needed to know about how much attention he'd ever paid to his actual wife versus his imaginary, perfect spouse. Chloe seems a bit off lately, doesn't she? I overheard Liam ask Noah one evening when they thought I was upstairs. Because apparently, my husband discussed my emotional state with his boyfriend, but not with me. She's probably just hormonal, Noah replied dismissively. You know how women get. Hormonal. After 3 years of marriage, that was his clinical analysis of my emotional state. Not concerned that his wife might be unhappy, not worried that something might be wrong. Just hormonal, like I was some kind of unpredictable weather pattern that occasionally produced storms. I wanted to march into that room and show them both exactly how hormonal I could get. But patience was about to pay off in ways they couldn't imagine. Emily called me on a Tuesday morning while Noah was at the gym with Liam, their daily routine that I'd never questioned before, but now seemed like the perfect cover for whatever they were really doing during those tower workouts. We need to meet, she said simply. I have what you're looking for. The photographs were absolutely damning. Noah and Liam leaving a hotel in Midtown, not the kind of place you'd go for a business meeting, unless your business involved king-sized beds and room service. Noah and Liam at a restaurant in the village, holding hands across the table like the lovers they obviously were. Noah and Liam kissing in the doorway of Liam's apartment building at midnight, when Noah had told me he was working late at the office. How long? I asked, staring at the evidence of my husband's double life spread across the table like playing cards in the world's worst poker game. From what I can tell, at least since college. Maybe longer. They're very careful, very discreet, but there are patterns. Hotel registrations under Liam's name. Restaurant reservations for 2 in locations where they're unlikely to run into anyone from their professional circle. Your husband has been living a double life for a very, very long time. I felt strangely calm as I absorbed this information. The betrayal was complete now. No more wondering. No more second-guessing my instincts. No more making excuses for behavior that had never made sense. Noah had married me to hide his relationship with Liam, undergone a vasectomy to ensure I'd never get pregnant, and created the perfect trap to ensure I'd walk away from our divorce with nothing. Except, he'd made one crucial miscalculation. He'd underestimated his wife. Me. I want a divorce, I announced on a Thursday evening, standing in the doorway of Noah's office while he reviewed quarterly reports. I'd rehearsed this moment for weeks, but my voice still came out stronger and clearer than I'd expected. Noah didn't even look up from his laptop. Because why would he? I was just his wife. Don't be dramatic, Chloe. Whatever's bothering you, we can discuss it rationally, like adults. There's nothing to discuss. I want out of this marriage. That got his attention. He finally lifted his head, and I saw calculation flicker in his eyes before his expression settled into what I'd learned to recognize as his negotiation face. The same one he used with difficult clients who didn't understand how lucky they were to have his expertise. Chloe, let's not make any hasty decisions. Marriage is work, and we both need to put in more effort. Effort? I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. Noah, when's the last time you touched me? When's the last time we had a real conversation about anything that mattered? When's the last time you treated me like a wife instead of an expensive accessory that looks good at company parties? He stood up, moving around his desk with the kind of predatory grace that had once made my heart race and now just made me incandescently angry. You're being emotional. This is exactly the kind of reaction that makes productive communication impossible. I'm done communicating. I filed the papers. You'll be served tomorrow morning. The mask slipped then, just for a moment, and I saw something cold and calculating in his expression. The real Noah. The one who'd planned this entire charade from the beginning. You might want to reconsider that decision, Chloe. Remember our prenuptial agreement? You signed away quite a lot of rights when you were so eager to become Mrs. Miller. There it was. The threat I'd been expecting. The reminder that he held all the financial power, that he'd structured our marriage to ensure I'd be left with nothing if I ever tried to leave. Noah had always been thorough in his planning. It was one of the qualities I'd once admired about him. I remember, I said calmly. I also remember the clause about fault-based divorce and the provision for spousal support in cases of adultery or fraud. His confidence wavered slightly, like a crack appearing in expensive marble. I don't know what you think you know, but I know about Liam. The words hung in the air between us like a live wire, crackling with dangerous energy. Noah's face went completely blank. That expressionless mask he wore when he was calculating his next move in a high-stakes negotiation. I don't know what you mean by that. Of course you don't. I turned to leave, then paused in the doorway for my exit line. Oh, and Noah? You might want to call your lawyer. You're going to need the best legal team money can buy. Trust me on this one. The divorce proceedings were exactly as brutal as I'd expected. Noah hired the most expensive legal team in the city. Men in $1,000 suits who specialized in protecting wealthy men from their inconvenient wives. They filed motion after motion, questioning my mental state, my financial contributions to the marriage, my fitness as a spouse. But they made one crucial mistake. They assumed I was the same naive woman who'd signed that prenuptial agreement 3 years ago. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in family court. I arrived early, dressed in a navy suit that projected confidence and respectability. While Noah's lawyers had requested a closed hearing, somehow the media had gotten wind of the case. Miller Investment Group was well known in financial circles, and wealthy men's messy divorces always made excellent copy. Noah arrived with his legal team and Liam, who was there as moral support and business partner. They huddled together at their table, whispering strategies and shooting confident glances in my direction, like they were planning a hostile takeover. I sat alone with my lawyer, attorney Olivia Chin, a brilliant woman who specialized in David versus Goliath cases and had never lost to a Goliath yet. Are you ready for this? Olivia asked quietly. I patted my purse, feeling the satisfying weight of that manila envelope inside. I've been ready for months. The hearing began with Noah's lawyer painting him as the devoted husband whose wife had become increasingly unstable and demanding. They presented our prenuptial agreement with a flourish of magicians pulling rabbits from hats, highlighting the clause that would leave me with minimal assets if our marriage ended due to my inability to provide children. My client entered this marriage with the express understanding that he and Mrs. Miller would start a family. His lawyer ended, like he was delivering a eulogy. When it became clear that Mrs. Miller was unable to fulfill this essential aspect of their marital agreement, the relationship deteriorated beyond repair. Unable to fulfill. The word choice was deliberate, designed to make me sound defective, broken, less than a real woman. I felt every eye in that courtroom assessing me, wondering what was wrong with me, that I couldn't give my husband the child he so desperately wanted. It was actually quite a performance. I almost believed it myself. But then, Noah's lawyer made his fatal mistake. He looked directly at me with that smug smile that said he thought he'd already won. Furthermore, Your Honor, medical evidence will show that Mrs. Miller is, in fact, infertile. My client has endured 3 years of false hope while his wife concealed her condition, making conception impossible. The silence in that courtroom was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop as Judge Harrison stared at Noah, waiting for an explanation that wasn't coming. Noah's face had gone from confident to pale to green in about 30 seconds. Quite the transformation for someone who usually controlled every room he entered. Your Honor, I said, standing up despite Olivia's surprised look. I have evidence I'd like to present to the court. I walked to the judge's bench, my heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown timer, and placed that beautiful manila envelope in his hands. The courtroom was silent, save for the rustle of paper as he opened it and examined the contents. The vasectomy records, the private investigator's photographs, bank statements showing hotel charges and restaurant bills for Noah's secret dates with Liam. Phone records documenting late-night calls between them while Noah was supposedly working late. Judge Harrison's expression grew darker as he reviewed each piece of evidence. Finally, he looked up, his gaze moving from Noah to Liam to me, like he was watching the world's most expensive tennis match. Mr. Miller, he said, his voice carrying the weight of judicial authority and barely contained disgust. Would you care to explain these documents? Noah's lawyer jumped up like his chair was on fire. Your Honor, we weren't prepared to address these allegations today. We request a continuance to properly review these documents and prepare our response. Allegations. Judge Harrison's eyebrows shot up as he held up one of the photographs. This appears to be your client kissing another man outside an apartment building. Are you suggesting this is somehow fabricated? I watched Noah's world crumble in real time. And honestly, I should probably feel guilty about how satisfying it was. But after 3 years of being made to feel like I was the problem, like I was broken and insufficient, watching him squirm felt like justice served with a side of karma. Liam had gone completely white and was staring at his hands like they held the secrets of the universe. The man who'd been so comfortable playing the concerned business partner was suddenly very interested in the floor tiles. Your Honor, Olivia stood up, her voice firm. These documents clearly show that Mr. Miller has been living a double life throughout his marriage to my client. The vasectomy records prove he never intended to have children, making his claims about my client's alleged infertility not just false, but deliberately fraudulent. The judge flipped through more photographs, his expression growing more disgusted by the minute. This court has seen many cases of marital deception, but this level of premeditation is particularly disturbing. Mr. Miller appears to have deliberately married Mrs. Miller as a cover for his relationship with. Judge Harrison glanced at his notes. Liam Hayes. Then structured their prenuptial agreement to ensure she would receive nothing when the inevitable divorce occurred due to his own voluntary sterilization. Noah finally found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak. Your Honor, my relationship with Liam is purely professional. Mr. Miller, the judge's voice was ice cold. I strongly advise you not to commit perjury in my courtroom. The evidence before me suggests otherwise, and I've seen enough court cases to recognize a lie when I hear one. The media section was frantically scribbling notes. I could already see tomorrow's headlines: investment mogul's secret life exposed. Millionaire's marriage was elaborate fraud. Noah's carefully constructed public image was disintegrating faster than a sandcastle in a hurricane, and I had front row seats to the show. In light of this evidence, Judge Harrison continued, "I'm ruling that the prenuptial agreement is void due to fraud." Mrs. Miller entered this contract under false pretenses, believing she was marrying a man who shared her desire for children, when in fact, Mr. Miller had deliberately made conception impossible. Noah's lawyer looked like he'd been slapped with a wet fish. "Your Honor, we respectfully request." Furthermore, the judge's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "I'm awarding Mrs. Miller 50% of all marital assets, including the primary residence, vacation properties, and a substantial portion of Miller Investment Group. 50% of everything, including the penthouse where I'd spent 3 years feeling like a stranger. The Hamptons house where I'd hosted countless parties for his friends and business associates. And most importantly, a controlling interest in the company that had been Noah and Liam's baby." Noah shot to his feet like he'd been electrocuted. "Your Honor, that's impossible. The company is my life's work, which you built during your marriage, using community property laws," Judge Harrison replied coolly. "Your wife was entitled to transparency about your intentions and fertility status. Instead, you committed fraud on a scale that shocks this court's conscience." I could practically see the dollar signs evaporating from Noah's eyes. The man who thought he was so clever, so careful in his planning, had just lost everything because he'd underestimated the woman he'd married for appearances. It was almost poetic. The aftermath of that courtroom victory was swift and brutal. Within 48 hours, news of Noah's deception had spread through Manhattan's financial district like wildfire. The story had everything gossip-hungry socialites loved: secret affairs, financial fraud, and a wealthy man's spectacular downfall. Noah's business associates started distancing themselves immediately. Nobody wanted to be associated with a man who'd committed marriage fraud, especially not in a world where reputation was everything. Phone calls went unreturned. Lunch invitations were rescinded. And suddenly, Noah found himself persona non grata in the very circles where he'd once held court. Liam bore the brunt of the professional fallout too. Their investors, already nervous about the scandal, began pulling their money when they realized the company's 2 founding partners had been living a lie that made soap operas look understated. The man who'd helped build Miller Investment Group from the ground up was suddenly toxic by association. I moved back into the penthouse while Noah packed his belongings like a defeated general retreating from battle. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman he'd tried to leave with nothing was now living in his home, surrounded by the art and furniture he'd chosen to impress people who no longer answered his calls. "This isn't over, Chloe," he said on his last day, standing in our former living room with boxes of his personal items stacked around him like the ruins of his former empire. "You think you've won something, but you have no idea how to run a business. You'll lose everything within a year." I was sitting in his favorite leather chair, the one where he used to read financial reports while ignoring me. "You know what's funny, Noah? You spent 3 years treating me like I was too stupid to notice your lies. 2 weeks, by the way. 2 weeks to fight back. Too dependent on you to survive on my own. And yet, here we are." The penthouse felt different once Noah was gone. Larger, somehow, like it could finally breathe without his suffocating presence. I walked through rooms that had felt like a museum and started making them actually mine. The first thing I did was donate his precious art collection, every pretentious piece he'd bought to show off his sophisticated taste, to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Let them deal with his legacy while I built my own. Attorney Olivia Chin, my lawyer, became my trusted advisor as I navigated the complex process of taking control of Miller Investment Group. The company was hemorrhaging clients and money like a sinking ship, but the bones of it were solid. Noah and Liam had built something valuable, even if they destroyed its reputation with their personal drama. "You have 2 choices," Olivia explained during one of our strategy sessions. "Sell your shares and walk away with enough money to buy a small island, or fight to rebuild the company's reputation and potentially make even more money in the long run." I thought about that for exactly 30 seconds. I didn't go through all this just to take the easy way out. Besides, I want to prove that this company can succeed without them. The first board meeting I attended as a major shareholder was memorable in all the best ways. These men, who'd known me only as Noah's decorative wife, suddenly had to take me seriously as a business owner. The adjustment was painful for everyone involved, but mostly for them. Mrs. Miller, one of the board members, said carefully, like he was defusing a bomb. "We appreciate your enthusiasm, but managing an investment firm requires specialized knowledge and experience." "You're absolutely right," I agreed, with a smile that could have cut glass. "Which is why I'm bringing in consultants and advisors to help guide the transformation. But make no mistake, I'm not going anywhere. This is my company now." Rebuilding Miller Investment Group's reputation was like performing surgery on a patient who was bleeding out on the operating table. Every day brought new challenges: clients threatening to leave, employees uncertain about their futures, competitors circling like vultures waiting to pick apart our remaining assets. But I had advantages that Noah never possessed. I understood people in ways he never bothered to learn. While he'd focused on numbers and profits, I'd spent years managing relationships, reading social dynamics, understanding what people really wanted versus what they said they wanted. Turns out those skills are surprisingly useful in business. My first major decision was rebranding. Miller Investment Group became Meridian Capital Partners, a fresh start with no baggage from the Miller scandal. I hired a crisis management team, a new marketing firm, and most importantly, I brought in Rebecca Torres as CEO. Rebecca was everything I wasn't. Financial expertise, 15 years of experience running investment firms, and a reputation for turning around struggling companies. She was also a woman in a male-dominated industry who understood exactly what it felt like to be underestimated by men in expensive suits. "Why me?" she asked during our first meeting. "You could hire any number of experienced executives who'd probably work for less money and fewer questions." "Because you know what it's like to have everyone assume you don't belong in the room," I said. "And because when I researched your track record, I realized you're exactly the kind of person Noah would never have hired, which makes you perfect for what we're trying to build." Rebecca smiled at that. "You want to prove that the company can succeed without him. I want to prove it can succeed better without him." The first 6 months were brutal in ways I hadn't anticipated. We lost about 40% of our client base, had to lay off a third of our staff, and there were days when I wondered if Noah had been right about my ability to run a business. But slowly, gradually, we started attracting new clients who were intrigued by our story. Turns out there were a lot of people who enjoyed the idea of investing with a company that had been built from the ashes of a fraud scandal. We marketed ourselves as transparent, ethical, and led by people who understood the real cost of deception. It was a compelling narrative, and more importantly, it worked. Liam tried to reach out to me once, about 8 months after the divorce was finalized. He called my office, somehow got past my assistant, and caught me during a late evening when I was reviewing quarterly reports and wondering if I'd bitten off more than I could chew. "Chloe, I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. "That was probably genuine. I never meant for you to get hurt in all this." "But you knew I would be," I replied calmly, setting down my pen and leaning back in my chair. "You knew Noah had married me under false pretenses. Knew he'd undergone a vasectomy. Knew he was planning to leave me with nothing when our childless marriage inevitably failed. You knew all of that, and you participated anyway." "I love him," Liam said simply, like that explained everything and absolved him of all responsibility. "I know you do. But love doesn't excuse cruelty, Liam. And what you both did to me was incredibly cruel. It was calculated, deliberate, and designed to destroy my life for your convenience." He was quiet for a long moment. "For what it's worth, I think Noah underestimated you from the beginning. He saw what he wanted to see, someone he could control and manipulate. He never saw how strong you really are." No, I agreed, he didn't. And that was his biggest mistake. 2 years after the divorce, Meridian Capital Partners wasn't just surviving. We were thriving in ways that would have made Noah's head spin. Our client portfolio had grown by 300%. We'd opened offices in Chicago and Los Angeles, and Rebecca had been featured on the cover of Financial Weekly as one of the industry's rising stars. But my real triumph came on a Tuesday morning when my assistant buzzed my office with unusual excitement in her voice. "Ms. Miller, you have a visitor. A Mr. Daniel Ramirez from Ramirez Associates. He says it's about a business proposition that you'll find very interesting." Daniel Ramirez turned out to be Detective Emily Ramirez's brother, the private investigator who'd helped me gather evidence against Noah. Unlike his sister, Daniel was a corporate acquisitions specialist who made his living buying and selling struggling companies, like some kind of business vulture. "I have something I think you'll want to see," he said, sliding a folder across my desk with the satisfaction of someone delivering excellent news. "Miller Investment Group is going up for sale." I opened the folder and felt a smile spread across my face that probably looked borderline predatory. Noah and Liam's original company, the one they'd lost most of their clients and investors after the scandal, was now bleeding money and desperately seeking a buyer. The asking price was a fraction of what the company had been worth during its heyday. "They're asking $12 million, Daniel explained, based on their remaining assets and client contracts. It's actually a decent deal for someone who knows how to turn around a damaged brand. $12 million. Pocket change compared to what I'd walked away with from the divorce settlement. More importantly, it would give me the chance to complete the circle, to own the company that Noah had built his entire identity around. There's one more thing," Daniel added, with a grin that suggested he enjoyed his work as much as I was about to enjoy mine. "They don't know you're the potential buyer. I've been representing you through a shell company. So, as far as they know, they're selling to anonymous investors." The thought of Noah's face when he realized who was buying his life's work was almost too delicious to contemplate. Almost. The acquisition went through without a hitch, smoother than Noah's lies had once seemed. Miller Investment Group officially became a subsidiary of Meridian Capital Partners. And with it came something I hadn't expected, closure that felt better than any therapy session. Noah called me the day the sale was finalized. I was in my office, looking out at the Manhattan skyline and thinking about how much my life had changed when my phone rang with his number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Chloe," his voice was flat, defeated, stripped of all the confidence that had once made him so attractive. "I just found out who bought the company." "Congratulations on the sale," I said pleasantly, like I was talking to any other business acquaintance. "I hear you got a fair price, considering the circumstances and the company's current reputation." "Why?" The question came out raw, angry, like a wounded animal. "You've already taken everything from me. Why this too?" "I didn't take anything from you, Noah. I simply stopped letting you take from me." I leaned back in my chair, feeling oddly peaceful about this conversation. "You built that company during our marriage, using community property. By law, I was always entitled to half of it. Now I own all of it. Fair and square. You don't understand what that company meant to me." "I understand perfectly. It was your identity, your proof of worth, your legacy. Just like our marriage was supposed to be my identity, my proof of worth, my legacy. The difference is, you tried to destroy mine while building yours on lies. I'm rebuilding yours with honesty." He was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he said, "What are you going to do with it?" "Turn it into something that doesn't require fraud to succeed." The integration of Miller Investment Group into Meridian Capital Partners took 6 months of careful planning. We kept the best employees, the most valuable client relationships, and the solid investment strategies that had made the company successful in the first place. Everything else, the toxic culture, the old boys network, the casual arrogance that had enabled Noah's deception, we scrapped completely. But the real surprise came when I discovered just how deep Noah's financial troubles had become. The man who'd once controlled millions was now struggling to make ends meet, like some kind of financial pauper. His reputation in the financial world was destroyed. His personal brand was toxic, and the divorce settlement had left him with far less than he'd anticipated. Liam had fared slightly better, but only because he'd had the sense to distance himself from Noah once the scandal broke. He'd moved to California, started a small consulting firm, and was slowly rebuilding his career under a lower profile. Smart man, even if his taste in partners was questionable. As for me, I was living in the penthouse that had once felt like a gilded prison, running companies that generated more revenue than Noah had ever dreamed of. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could actually breathe. But the story doesn't end with professional success and financial revenge, because apparently, life had more surprises in store for me. I was at a charity gala, The kind of event I'd attended dozens of times as Noah's arm candy when I met Dr. Ethan Stone. He was a pediatric surgeon at Mount Sinai, recently divorced himself, and refreshingly unimpressed by my business success or social status. "So, you're the woman who brought down Miller Investment Group," he said when we were introduced, his tone more curious than judgmental. "I'm the woman who survived Miller Investment Group," I corrected him. "There's a difference." He studied me with intelligent gray eyes that reminded me of storm clouds. "I imagine there is." That must have taken incredible strength. It was the first time in years that someone had acknowledged what I'd been through, rather than just focusing on what I had gained from it. Most people saw the penthouse, the successful company, the financial victory, and assumed I'd come out ahead. Ethan was the first person to recognize that surviving that level of deception and betrayal had required something deeper than just good lawyers and determination. We talked for 3 hours at that gala, long after the formal program had ended and most guests had gone home. He told me about his work saving children's lives, about his own messy divorce from a woman who'd wanted a doctor's salary but not a doctor's schedule. I told him about building a company from the ashes of a fraudulent marriage, about learning to trust my instincts after years of being gaslit by a professional. "Would you like to have dinner sometime?" he asked as the evening wound down. "Somewhere quiet where we can continue this conversation without 100 people pretending not to eavesdrop." I almost said no. After everything I'd been through with Noah, the idea of trusting another man felt about as appealing as voluntary root canal surgery. But something about Ethan felt different, genuine in a way that Noah had never been, even during his most convincing performances. "I should probably warn you," I said. "I come with a lot of baggage, public scandal, trust issues, an ex-husband who committed marriage fraud, and a tendency to investigate people's backgrounds before the second date." Ethan smiled, and it was nothing like Noah's practice charm. This was warm, real, unguarded. "I come with emergency surgery schedules, a tendency to disappear into work for 12-hour stretches, and an ex-wife who tells anyone who'll listen that I chose my career over our marriage. Want to compare baggage over dinner on Friday?" I realized I was smiling back. The first genuine smile I'd felt in longer than I could remember. "That sounds perfect." 6 months later, I was standing in the bathroom of my penthouse, staring at a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines, feeling emotions I couldn't quite name. After everything Noah had put me through, the years of thinking I was broken, the public humiliation in court, the cruel irony of being called sterile by a man who'd made himself sterile, I was pregnant. Ethan and I had been taking things slowly, building trust and intimacy in ways I'd never experienced with Noah. He'd been patient with my anxiety about commitment, understanding about my need for independence, and amazingly supportive of my business endeavors. When I told him about wanting children someday, he'd simply said, "Someday sounds good to me." "When you're ready." Apparently, someday had arrived sooner than either of us expected. "Chloe?" Ethan called from the bedroom. "Everything okay in there?" I opened the bathroom door, still holding the test, still trying to process this surreal turn of events. Ethan took one look at my face, then at the test in my hands, and his expression shifted from concern to pure wonder. "Are you?" he started, then stopped, waiting for me to tell him how I felt about this news before he revealed his own reaction. "I'm pregnant," I said, the words feeling almost surreal. After all of Noah's lies about me being infertile, after believing for years that I might never be able to have children, I'm actually pregnant. Ethan crossed the room in 2 steps and wrapped me in his arms, careful and gentle, like he was afraid I might break. "How do you feel about it?" "Terrified," I admitted. "Excited." "Vindicated." Like the universe has a sense of humor and excellent timing. When Lily Grace Stone was born on a snowy Tuesday morning in February, weighing 7 pounds and 2 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and her father's determined chin, I finally understood what true victory looked like. It wasn't the financial success. It wasn't the professional recognition. It wasn't even the satisfying satisfaction of watching Noah's empire crumble. True victory was holding my daughter in my arms, knowing that I'd survived everything that had tried to break me and emerged stronger, wiser, and infinitely more capable of love than I'd ever thought possible. Ethan proposed when Lily was 6 months old. Not with a massive diamond designed to impress other people, but with his grandmother's simple gold band and a promise that he'd spend his life being worthy of the trust I'd placed in him. We married in a small ceremony in the garden of the penthouse, surrounded by the people who'd supported me through the darkest period of my life. As for Noah and Liam, they weren't invited, obviously. I'd heard they'd moved to Portland, where Liam was running a small investment advisory firm and Noah was working as a mid-level analyst. They were together, finally living openly as a couple, but their professional reputations had never recovered. Sometimes, the best revenge really is living well, and I was living very, very well indeed. And still am. Sometimes, the best revenge really is living well, and I was living very, very well indeed. And still am. Life, as I discovered, rarely adheres to a perfect, tidy conclusion. The courtroom victory, the corporate triumph, the finding of true love and motherhood, these were not just endpoints, but new beginnings. The quiet satisfaction of my present wasn't simply the absence of Noah and his drama, it was the presence of everything I'd built. My daughter, Lily, was growing fast, her bright, curious eyes mirroring the joy that had finally found a permanent home in my life. Holding her, watching her take her first wobbly steps across the penthouse living room, her tiny hand reaching for Ethan's outstretched fingers, these were the moments that redefined wealth for me. It wasn't about the soaring balance sheets or the prestigious awards Meridian Capital Partners was now accumulating. It was about this profound, unshakable connection. Ethan was everything Noah wasn't: present, authentic, and utterly devoted. We had our moments, of course. Parenthood is a crash course in humility, patience, and sleep deprivation. But through it all, there was a foundational respect and love that was a balm to my long-scarred heart. He understood my need for independence, my drive to lead Meridian, and never once made me feel like I had to choose between my career and my family. He cheered my successes, soothed my frustrations, and reminded me, daily, of the strength I possessed. It was a partnership, a true collaboration, not a performance. Meridian Capital Partners, under Rebecca's brilliant leadership and my strategic direction, continued its meteoric rise. We'd cultivated a culture of transparency and ethical investment, becoming a beacon in an industry often clouded by greed. We'd moved into a sleek, state-of-the-art office building, a far cry from the old Miller Investment Group digs. The acquisition of Noah's former company, now fully integrated and rebranded, was less about further revenge and more about proving a point that a company built on genuine talent and integrity would always outlast one built on deception. It felt good to know that the legacy I was creating was one of resilience and authenticity. But even in this gilded cage of success and happiness, the echoes of the past occasionally found a way to reverberate. Every now and then, a journalist would dig up the old Miller scandal, or a new employee, unfamiliar with the company's history, would innocently ask about the original founders. I handled these with grace, always focusing on Meridian's present values and future vision, rarely dwelling on the darkness of the past. I'd made peace, or so I thought, with Noah and Liam's story. Their professional lives were ruined, their reputations tarnished beyond repair. They were living in Portland, a far cry from the high-stakes world they once dominated. I truly believed they were relegated to the dusty annals of my personal history. Then, about 3 years after Lily was born, and almost 5 years since the divorce, a new kind of ripple appeared. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, in the quiet corners of the financial world. Whispers. Not about Noah, not directly, but about a new, aggressively competitive boutique investment firm making waves in the West Coast market. Ever heard of Phoenix Group? Rebecca asked me one morning, a furrow in her brow as she scrolled through her tablet. They're small, but they've been pulling some impressive deals out from under major players. And their strategies, they feel familiar. Very aggressive, very old school, Miller Group. My stomach clenched. Miller Group? Are you serious? It's just a gut feeling, she'd said, but their MO is eerily similar to how Noah and Liam used to operate before everything imploded. My blood ran cold. The manila envelope, the vasectomy, the calculated cruelty, it all flashed before my eyes. Could they be back? No, it couldn't be. They were finished. Weren't they? I pulled some strings discreetly. A few phone calls to Daniel Ramirez, the brother of Emily, my former private investigator, who now worked in corporate intelligence. He was excellent at digging up dirt. A week later, a thick file landed on my desk. The CEO of Phoenix Group was a man named Marcus Thorne. A quick background check revealed Marcus Thorne to be none other than Liam Hayes, using his middle name. And the silent partner, the financial muscle, the strategic mastermind behind Phoenix Group, Noah Miller. He'd resurfaced. He'd rebranded himself, changed his professional name, and was clearly attempting a comeback, using Liam as his public face. The audacity was, once again, breathtaking. My first instinct was pure, unadulterated rage. How dare they? After everything, they thought they could just re-emerge, like phoenixes from the ashes of their own making, and attempt to reclaim their place? But this rage was different from the one that had consumed me after I found the vasectomy papers. This wasn't the rage of a broken woman. It was the righteous indignation of a woman who had fought to build something good and refused to let it be tainted again. "They're coming for us," Chloe, Rebecca stated, her jaw tight, after I'd shown her Daniel's report. "They're too far on the West Coast to directly compete for our existing New York clients, but they're aggressively expanding. And they're targets. They're moving into our smaller, emerging markets. It's a direct challenge." I nodded, the anger slowly solidifying into a cold, hard resolve. "Then we meet them head-on." This wasn't about revenge anymore, not truly. This was about protecting Meridian, protecting the employees who had put their faith in our ethical model, and protecting the legacy I was building for Lily. It was about proving that integrity wasn't just a marketing slogan, but a viable, superior business strategy. The next few months were a strategic chess match. Phoenix Group, true to their old form, was ruthless. They spread rumors, attempted hostile takeovers of companies Meridian was courting, and even tried to poach some of our key talent, dangling exorbitant salaries and promises of quick riches. I saw their playbook, every move a painful echo of Noah's past manipulations. This time, however, I was prepared. I wasn't the naive woman who'd been gaslit for years. I had Rebecca, a formidable CEO, by my side. I had Olivia Chin, the lawyer who'd dismantled Noah in court, now on retainer for corporate matters. And I had Ethan, my calm, steady anchor, who reminded me to breathe, to rest, and to never lose sight of why I was fighting. One evening, after putting Lily to bed, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something compelled me. "Chloe? It's Liam." His voice was strained, thinner than I remembered. A ghost from a past I thought was buried. I remained silent, clutching my phone. "Chloe, I need to talk to you. Privately." "You have nothing to say to me, Liam." My voice was colder than I intended, laced with years of suppressed resentment. "This is about Phoenix Group. It's about Noah. He's going too far." "Going too far?" "You both went too far the day you committed marriage fraud, Liam. You think I'm going to forget that now?" "No, I don't expect you to forget. But he's making mistakes. Big ones. He's cutting corners, playing dirty, and it's going to come back to haunt him. It's going to haunt us." "Why are you calling me, Liam?" "Why no?" I asked, my heart pounding. Was this a trap? Another manipulation? Because he's losing it. The pressure is getting to him. He's obsessed with you, with Meridian. He sees you everywhere. He talks about you like you're his personal demon. He's desperate to prove he can beat you. A hollow laugh escaped me. He tried that once before. It didn't work out so well for him. This is different. He's gambling everything. He's using questionable funds, making shady deals. If the regulators get wind of it, it won't just be Phoenix Group that goes down. It'll be a full-blown financial scandal. And I'm tired of cleaning up his messes. I'm tired of living in the shadows. I'm tired of him. The raw weariness in his voice was palpable. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was a crack in the carefully constructed facade they'd maintained for so long. "What do you want, Liam?" "I want out. And I want to do it cleanly. I want to help you take him down, so I can finally be free. I hung up, my hand trembling slightly. Liam, offering to turn on Noah? The thought was almost unbelievable. I immediately called Olivia. Her advice was cautious. It could be a trap, Chloe. Or he could be desperate enough to be genuine. Either way, we proceed with extreme caution. If he offers information, we verify it. We don't act on anything unless we have concrete proof outside of his word. I understood. Liam's credibility was shot, but his desperation might be real. Over the next few weeks, Liam provided a steady trickle of information, always through burner phones and anonymous emails, details about shady offshore accounts, aggressive short-selling tactics that bordered on market manipulation, and hidden clauses in their investment contracts that defrauded smaller clients. Every piece of information was meticulously verified by Daniel Ramirez's team and Olivia's legal experts. What we uncovered was a complex web of financial misconduct, a house of cards built on greed and desperation. Noah, fueled by an insatiable need to win against me, had spiraled far beyond the lines of ethical business practices. He wasn't just attempting a comeback, he was actively destroying himself and dragging Liam down with him. The climax came during a high-profile merger negotiation that Phoenix Group was attempting to finalize with a respected, old-money East Coast firm. It was Noah's biggest play, his chance to re-establish himself at the top. But Meridian Capital Partners was already involved, advising the East Coast firm on the deal. I saw an opportunity, not for petty revenge, but for definitive justice. During a crucial board meeting as Noah, looking impeccably tailored and radiating his old, false confidence, presented his final terms, Olivia and I walked in, flanked by SEC investigators. The looks on Noah and Liam's faces were priceless. Noah's practiced smile evaporated, replaced by a mixture of shock and sheer terror. Liam just looked defeated, a quiet resignation in his eyes. The room, filled with powerful, curious executives, went dead silent. Mr. Miller, the lead SEC investigator, began, his voice calm but authoritative. We have reason to believe your firm, Phoenix Group, has engaged in several acts of market manipulation and financial fraud. Olivia then laid out the evidence, piece by meticulous piece, the offshore accounts, the fraudulent contracts, the specific instances of illegal short-selling. She ended with a chilling flourish, and we have testimony from a cooperating witness, Mr. Liam Hayes, implicating Mr. Miller as the primary architect of these schemes. Noah erupted, a primal roar of fury and betrayal. Liam, you backstabbing snake. After everything. Liam simply met his gaze, his eyes devoid of emotion. I told you, Noah. I'm tired of cleaning up your messes. The public spectacle was everything Noah had always feared. The media, already hungry for scandal given his past, descended like vultures. Phoenix Group imploded within days. Regulatory bodies launched full investigations, and the repercussions were severe. Noah Miller, the once indomitable millionaire, was not only professionally ruined but now faced potential criminal charges and massive civil lawsuits. He lost everything, his remaining fortune, his reputation, and the last shred of his professional identity. This time, there would be no comeback. This time, it was truly over for him. Liam, due to his cooperation, received a more lenient outcome, though his career in finance was still permanently derailed. I heard he eventually moved away, far from the financial world, seeking a quieter life. I never spoke to him again, and I never saw Noah after that day in the boardroom. The chapter of my life dominated by them was, finally, irrevocably closed. The aftermath brought a profound sense of peace. It wasn't the exhilarating rush of revenge, but a deeper, more enduring calm. Meridian Capital Partners emerged stronger, our reputation for integrity solidified. Our client base grew exponentially, drawn to our ethical stance and our proven track record. Rebecca became a true partner, and together, we steered the company to even greater heights. But the greatest victory wasn't etched on a quarterly report or in the glowing features in financial magazines. It was in the small, everyday moments. Watching Lily play, her laughter echoing through our home. Sharing quiet dinners with Ethan, talking about our day, our dreams, our daughter. It was in the confidence with which I walked into any room, knowing my worth was not tied to a man's approval or a public image, but to the woman I had become. I realized that my journey wasn't just about surviving betrayal, but about transforming it. The pain, the humiliation, the rage, they had forged me into someone stronger, someone who understood the value of authenticity, integrity, and genuine connection. Years later, I stood on the balcony of the penthouse, looking out at the city lights twinkling like fallen stars. Lily, now a bright-eyed 10-year-old, was snuggled beside me, pointing out buildings. Ethan came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about, love?" he murmured. "Everything," I whispered, leaning back into his embrace. "How far we've come. How beautiful it all is." My life wasn't a fairy tale anymore. It was something far better. It was real. It was messy sometimes, but it was authentic. It was built on truth and love, not lies and manipulation. And that, I realized, was the only happily ever after that truly mattered. This whole journey, from that painful court battle to finding true happiness and building something real, has been wild. It's made me wonder a lot about how people bounce back from devastating betrayal. If you've ever had your trust shattered, what was the biggest lesson you learned, and how did you finally reclaim your peace? Share your stories below. I'm truly curious to hear them.